Like long-distance radio waves bouncing off the ionosphere at midnight, these strange and powerful images speak to us, making the unseen seen. In a world where inanimate objects evoke hidden animate meanings and dream settings suddenly morph, inspiring fear, wonder, and surprise, we keep looking around the corner and wonder, what will happen next? On this edition of Art Now, we'll look at the work of Gerald Guthrie.
Hi, welcome to Art Now, a program where we talk to artists whose work is part of our community. I'm Pat Salmon, and I'll be your host. Our guest today is Gerald Guthrie, who's a professor at the School of Art and Design at the University of Illinois. Thanks for being with us today, Gerald.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah. Now, your father was an art professor, so you were exposed to art from a really young age. How do you think your father influenced your direction as an artist?
Well, he was, as you said, a professor, and he never pushed any of us to become artists, but I think just being around him was enough to be inspired. He had ways of seeing things that were unusual, and he'd point things out that the average person might not notice, and he was just very engaged and obviously enjoying what he was involved with, and I think that was enough to kind of get me interested in it too. He was a teacher, and that kept him young and vital, and I thought, well, that sounds like a pretty good avenue as well.
Great. I know you started out with an MFA in printmaking, but the media that you've been using have changed a lot over the years, especially with the growth of computer technology. I know you brought a few examples, so let's take a look at those, and you can talk a bit about working in the different media.
Okay. Well, I started off as a printmaker, as you mentioned. I don't have any images of the prints, that goes back a ways, but these are some drawings that I did which were very similar in the way the prints looked, and I was working on both of these sort of at the same time. I would lay down areas of color and then draw with a colored, in this case, colored pencils over the top of the color and use photographic images as influences. But the content of it is what people kind of wonder about, and I usually tell people that, you know, don't worry too much, because I'm not sure I know either, you know, exactly what these things mean, but they're meant to be somewhat open-ended, and this one I enjoy the fact that he's looking at the phone as if it's some kind of unusual thing when he's got this very strange headdress on. Right. And informally, the headdress is like the phone, so I like to kind of play with those kinds of things as well. Here's another drawing as well, and the idea that you can't see how long the string is and what's on the other end of the string. And, I'm interested in sort of using stereotypical guys in suits so that you don't dwell too much on the individuality of these people, yet and even the masks are sort of a way of hiding identity. This is another drawing, and again taken from some kind of a magazine. I think it was about how to defend yourself, and then put into this very odd situation of collecting these little toys and so forth. They're not really toys, but just mysterious little objects. And then this one I asked people if they know what this is. It's called The Mystery of Life, and it really is based on an actual photograph. The hand form, the skeleton hand, and the guy carrying it is really from a photograph, and most people are kind of confused about what that really is. And later I've got a picture that will clarify what this came from. Then I started getting involved with sculpture and kinetic art, and I always wanted to do animation and never had the patience to sit down and draw animation. So the idea of making a little environment that was mechanized with a peephole that you could look into was a way of bringing to life some of these ideas that I had. And so this is the interior of one of these, and I went to Lincoln Hall and looked at the way the architecture was in Lincoln Hall, and kind of looked at elevators. I actually got the head of the elevator crew at the university to take me around to look at all the elevators on campus, and I got to ride in all these old elevators. So research is a big part of this for me, which I really enjoy. But anyway, this is what you first see, and then the little light above the door changes, and this strange thing is, you know, it's your worst fear of who's going to be on the elevator when it opens up. And then it'll close again, and it'll go back down to the basement, and then open up again without anything on it. And this is the inside of what this looks like, so you can get a little bit of idea of the motors and the scale. It's about 1 inch to 1 foot. Then I got involved with digital imaging and the software, and how it could create realistic images, and so this became a new direction that I was very excited about. At first I was going to just use it to help me with my drawings, and then I actually started rendering with the computer and rendering these things out. And since I was a printmaker, these were done in a series of limited edition prints. So here's these sort of cryptic codes on this sort of never-ending routine of things driving through your living room. This is
that's one of my favorites.
Standing alone against the everyone else, and about privacy and so forth. All those telescopes are kind of outnumbering the one telescope in our space. And this is sort of like being above it all, rising above the situation, and again, very open-ended as to what these things are about and why they're happening. And this was the last computer-generated print that I would show. And here you can see the potential problem of water and electricity not mixing, and we see how the one side the cord is connected to the power lines, and the hose is connected to a water tower, and it's all going to happen right in this pan of water. And so who knows what's going to happen.
Right. Now, I know you brought a few things as well that show some of the influences on your art and why you've chosen some of the images you've chosen. So why don't we take a look at those?
Okay. I'm interested in rituals, and the fraternal orders, the fraternal lodges are of particular interest to me too. Why is it that we as people decide that we need to bond together with certain rituals and certain ideas that identify us as a group? And I was never invited into any groups when I was young, so I'm really kind of fascinated with what it takes to be part of a group. And I actually like being an individual and not being a part of a group. So I'm kind of fascinated with this idea. And these guys would dress up in robes. So I have a collection of all this stuff. I have robes and fezzes and ritual devices that they use, and I'm kind of fascinated with that. And then I really like the 1930s. I like the design of the 1930s, sort of like Art Deco and modern styling and streamlining, and the idea too of utopia, where science was going to bail us out and give us a wonderful life of leisure, and everyone would be happy, and all this would be created by machines that would do our bidding for us. So I have a collection of these old magazines too. And then I mentioned earlier, this is actually a clipping from one of those magazines that shows, in fact, a guy carrying that skeletal hand. And in fact, what it is a whale flipper skeleton. And we can see the opposing thumb, and I'm really interested in sort of how close they are to us, And that's kind of just, you'd have to figure that out on your own, I guess.
Right, yeah. Well, in general, a question I'd have for you is, what would you like your art to do for your audience?
Well, as I mentioned before, it's very open-ended, and so I kind of ask the audience to partake and be part of it, and maybe not be frustrated with a easy answer right away. And I believe the things that keep us involved and engaged are those things that are open-ended. Mm-hmm. If you think about religion or science or things that engage people, they usually don't have sort of a closure. There's an open-endedness to it. And so I'm asking people to kind of have their own interpretation for what these things might be. I lead them in a direction, but I don't necessarily give them answers.
Right. Okay, now the latest things you've been doing have been computer animations. And we have one here. It's called The Realm of Possibility, and it was created in 2009. It's been shown at many film festivals, including the Nashville Film Festival, the Byron Bay International Film Festival in Australia, the Maryland Film Festival, the Manipulated Image Festival at Santa Fe, the Indianapolis International Film Festival, and the Animatu International Digital Animation Festival in Portugal, where it won the RTP2 Onda Critic Award. We're going to take a look at it now. We'll see it in its entirety, and then talk a little bit about some of where you got some of the images that you used in this.
When a trio of biliteral propositions of relation is such that the three propositions are so related that if the first two were true, the third would be true, the trio is called a syllogism. Note also that the question whether the conclusion is or is not consequent from its premises is not affected by the actual truth or falsity of any of the trio, but depends entirely on their relationship to each other. I greatly value everything that John gives me. This bone was a present from John. The things of which I take particular care are things I do not give to my dog. All soldiers can march. Some babies are not soldiers. Some babies cannot march. All selfish men are unpopular. All obliging men are popular. All obliging men are unselfish. No man with long hair can fail to be a poet. Amos Judd has never been in prison. Men with short hair have all been in prison. All cats understand French. Some chickens are cats. Some chickens understand French. The first two are, as it happens, not strictly true in our planet, but there is nothing to hinder them from being true in some other planet, say Mars or Jupiter, in which case the third would also be true in that planet, and its inhabitants would probably engage chickens as nursery governesses. all X are M. All M are Y. Some X are Y. Therefore, all X are Y.
Okay, I think we have some images that you wanted to show then, the original photos and things that you worked from when you did this.
Yeah, so like I mentioned before that I like to do research on these projects, and it takes me usually about 7 or 8 months to finish one of those short animations, and it's very, very time consuming. Part of it though is because I do take the time to kind of explore and find out more about this or that. And in the case of the library and the animation, I love old buildings and old spaces, and especially libraries, which I'm afraid are becoming a bit endangered. Right. And so I went again around on campus to the Rickard Library and to the math library in Altgeld Hall, and took some photographs and used these as references to make my sort of own amalgamation of the ideal library. And so these are some pictures from those spaces, and then you can see here, this is a still from the animation of what I ended up with as a library space. And then after I built this, then I began to think about how to incorporate the rest of the plot. The plot, if you might call it that, is pretty stream of consciousness. And since it does take me so long to work on these things, I can change directions anytime I want. I work by myself. And so as something occurs to me, it might change the direction of the piece as I work on it. But I knew I wanted to have a space like this. And then I was going to have this figure walking around in it. When this is the first time I've used a figure in an animation. The figure, I actually got the guy's movement from a file online called motion capture. And someone somewhere recorded their walking, and then I was able to plug that into my figure and have him walk in a pretty realistic way. But where was he going to walk? And I as a printmaker, I was interested in hand-drawn lithographs, and I know that they would have a completely different look if they were blown up as opposed to machine-made lithographs or prints that, like advertising posters or whatever, is all done by machine. But if in the early days they would hand draw all this, and I thought, well, it would really be wonderful to zoom way in and see what the pencil strokes look like, highly magnified. So I got this print on eBay, turn of the century print. It's a French game board print, and it shows how you might move through a sequence with at the turn of the century, the biplane was a new thing, and so it's all the adventures of this person taking a biplane. Now here you can see it much more. I scanned it at high resolution. You can see it blown up here, and how the pencil strokes become really kind of rich when you look at them very close. The colors are beautiful. And the colors are really rich. And then I also was interested in using masks because I didn't think I was good enough to animate a 3D face very well. And so I looked at different masks and got a collection of these. images that helped me come up with sort of my own idea of what a very, very strange mask might look like. I try to make these things as strange as possible to really contrast with the mundane background or realistic scenes of the space. And then the print had these biplanes on it. I had no plan of using biplanes, but I thought, well, I'll go with that. So I researched the Curtis Jenny biplane and got all these different images and used those as a way to kind of accurately make one of these little biplanes, which then they fly around in this library. And I think that's the last image of those resources.
Okay, well, one question I've had about your animations is they also have sound. How do you choose sound that goes with it? How do you get that to fit what you've already got in your head visually?
Well, I finish all the animation first, and then I do the sound last. But I download, the internet's a great resource, as everyone knows, and I can buy or get free files of different sounds, and then I edit them with a sound editor, and to me it brings it to life. I just like the walking. The walking is somewhat like a beat of a drum that kind of goes on and creates a pace for the film that I like. I used to play music and record music, and I had a 4-track recorder, so I spent a lot of time with mixers and so forth, and feel like I have a little bit of an idea about equalization and reverberation and how to make those kinds of things sort of fit a space.
Right, yeah, because the sound does sound very realistic. Yeah.
And I even found out that even just nothing is worse than a hiss, and so sometimes I just basically have a hiss rather than complete silence if there's nothing going on.
Right. Let me ask one more thing about, you often play with point of view. Do you think about that consciously when you're working, or because you often have something in your work where it looks as if it's one thing and then the angle changes and it's actually something else. Mm-hmm.
Well, I like point of view. I mean, I like dreams. I think, I'm basically a surrealist or a magic realist, and so dreams are always sort of from your point of view, if I'm not, mistaken. And so I like that first person kind of experience. And of course the camera, I don't have a lot of dialogue, so the camera has to become almost like a person, and that point of view of the camera. And so I also enjoy scale and how you can play with scale, and like you're talking about sort of play games where something might be really huge or it might be really small, and it's just how you look at it, I guess. Right. And moving around and seeing things at different sizes is kind of interesting. I always wished I was this tall when I was a little kid and I could explore the grass or under the couch or something like that. Yeah.
I guess one question I've always had for most artists is, how do you start a piece? What sparks it in your mind? What gets you started on something?
Well, I'm at that point right now, and each time I do one of these, they take so long, I want to do better. And so I'm almost got sort of an artist block right now, because I don't, you try to do better and that makes it more of a challenge. But I have a grain of an idea, and usually I sleep on things. I believe on sleeping on things. And so I'll have an idea, and if a week later I still remember it, I think, well, maybe that'll be all right, because I'm going to spend all this time on it, and I really want to make sure that at the end I don't feel like I've, done the wrong thing. Absolutely. So it's sort of what rises to the top as an idea. So I have a grain of an idea now that I'm going to use, and like I mentioned earlier, I don't mind changing and being intuitive or even sort of improvisational. I think about musicians who, a jazz musician might play a piece through but never do it the same way. It has a beginning and an end, and of course I believe in that, but how you get through it might change according to any number of influences.
Right. Okay. I think we're just about out of time now, so I want to thank you again for being with us today. I really enjoyed talking about your work. Of course, I'm an admirer of your work. So. Well,
thank you very much. I'm very, very pleased to be here, and it was great. I appreciate your helping me with this, inviting me to do this, and I'm anxious to see it.
All right, great. Thanks for watching Art Now. Our guest has been Gerald Guthrie, and you can see his art locally at the National Center for Supercomputing Applications on campus, the Cinema Gallery in Urbana, and online you can go to geraldguthrie.com or go to Vimeo and type in Gerald Guthrie. We hope you've enjoyed today's show, and we also hope it will inspire you to explore the local art scene and to make your own art now.